What are we about to do? Where are we going?
Sure. So right now we're at a Burris Hall. It's 5 to 4, so in 20 minutes, 4:15 to 4:30. That's it, 15 minutes. We miraculously got an appointment set up with the president of Virginia Tech, Timothy Sands. He's at VT Sandsman on Twitter. So I think it was summer 2015. I came down to Virginia Tech to do some workshops, and when I was looking through Twitter, I noticed that their president was just all over Twitter, engaging, replying, retweeting, offering insight and information and resources, and I was blown away from the digital leadership standpoint. So I've been following him ever since. And since I were coming down here again, I started to see like what he was up to. So we got here Monday night, I think, right?
Yeah.
So Monday night at like 9, 10 o'clock before I went to bed, I was like, what do I have to lose? And I tweeted at him, hey, at VT Sandsman, I'm down here doing some work with the Virginia Tech Student Affairs Division, doing some digital storytelling, would love to interview you for 15 minutes, #digital leadership. I mentioned it Tuesday morning to I think it's Hunter, I think her title is like the Director of Communication Technology for Student Affairs, and she used to work in the President's office. She sent an email over to somebody, and about 30 minutes ago I found out that I have an interview, and I'm bringing you, Dan, along, and I have probably like 5 questions to ask him. But it's crazy because it goes in line to what I talked about last night with the college students of one, how to leverage social media to find a job you love. But I talked about the very first thing I said, I brought up the word audacity, that you have to have audacity to take risks, to be bold, be unconventional, and realize that there's no more gatekeepers, and especially on Twitter. Trying to email him or hunt him down would have been tough, but I think I preach what, I practice what I preach, and so now I'm gonna get a 15-minute interview with him. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Hey everybody, Kevin O'Connell here, and this is a random last-minute Hail Mary that I was like, you know what, let me take a shot in the dark, and I tweeted at Timothy Sands here 2 nights ago when I got to Virginia Tech. With a little assistance from the Virginia Tech Student Affairs Division, we now have you here for about 15 minutes. We're in his beautiful office. He just came back into town from some meetings, and I really want to talk about digital leadership and your use of Twitter. So from my understanding, from what I've heard, when you came here to Virginia Tech, you were talking with, I think, maybe your children. You were like, I need to get on a digigal platform.
No, they told me that.
They told you.
Yeah, that wasn't something that occurred to me.
Okay,
but,
and so why Twitter, or what was, was it like overnight you were like, I'll get on it, or was it kind of like, let me test the waters? Like, why Twitter?
Well, I had a little bit of lead time. I was announced as the next president in December of 2013, and I didn't start for 6 months. Okay. So my kids in their 20s, early to late 20s, they basically said you have to be on a platform. They chose Twitter, and I'm glad they did, because I'm also on Instagram, but I think the others are a little more challenging for me in terms of investing the time needed to really have a presence. Facebook is very difficult. I love Facebook, but it's difficult for me to keep it up. So Twitter's quick. It's the proverbial 140 characters, and so it wasn't too hard to get into. And there's a lot of syntax and a lot of culture embedded in tweeting that I had to learn, and
there's a little art or science to it, savviness.
Oh, definitely. And my in the first several weeks to months, my biological kids, off in different parts of the U.S., were following me and immediately texting me when I did something good, but more often when
using the hashtag culture correctly.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need a dot there. You should never abbreviate that.
So they taught you, and you learned by doing.
Yeah, I learned by doing. I'm sure I made umpteen mistakes. I know I did, but nothing fatal, and they just kept reinforcing it, and then eventually they let me out of the nest.
Do you remember your first tweet or like your first week using it?
I remember my first tweet. I don't actually remember what I actually wrote.
So there's actually a website like myfirsttweet.com, and it'll aggregate what it was. But I'm curious what.
Yeah, and I can't. You mentioned that, and I'd have to go back and look, but it's something to do, I think, with the drill field and just being on the drill field, and I can't. It was something that was important to me. I thought about it a little bit before I tweeted. But it was just an introduction. Here I am, looking forward to running into you on a drill field. So,
cool.
So
that was your birth, your announcement to the VT world. Cool. So other things that I've seen and heard just by watching you, I've seen everything where like you and your wife might be in one of the dining halls and saying, hey, we have a few spots, come join us. I've screenshotted examples where students, class of 2019, 20, 21, will be like, when are housing assignments coming out? And you beat everybody to the punch. Why is that? And how do you aggregate your information, or how do you kind of like how come you're there?
Well, sometimes I know before most people what's going on, and so I do try to respond if I know the answer. I'm careful with it though, because sometimes I've got people who report to me whose job it is, and that's their domain, and they don't want me jumping out ahead. So I can't respond to everything on the spot. But if I have the information, and often I'll tag some part of Virginia Tech on Twitter, and they'll come right back. And we've kind of developed that culture where if I tag a unit at Virginia Tech, parking facilities, whatever it is, they know that they ought to respond, and they do. Most of them do very quickly, and they do it very politely, and they gather the information, and so it is a kind of a feel of, I hope, of being responsive.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in both online and offline, that serendipity and just the random, limitless connection economy we live in. But has there been an opportunity for yourself, for the school, for students, or a memory that sticks out of like this either evolved or started with Twitter, like an engagement with Twitter? Oh,
I think there are lots of little ones.
What's that stands out?
Well, I think, let's see, what would be a good one? Well, I mean, what you did happens every week or so.
Oh yeah.
So there's something, someone tweets at me, say, hey, can you get together?
And is that with students or alumni?
Could be anybody. Could be anybody. And it doesn't always work, but we always try to make it work. Cool. So there are lots of little ones. I would say that there have been changes in the way we communicate holistically as a result of interactions through Twitter. So when we have a campus emergency or a snowfall or something like that, all of our communications folks are kind of watching what's happening with my Twitter account. And I'm also watching what they're doing and making sure I'm not stepping out in the wrong direction. And they've learned, I think, and I've learned, who's watching what information feed and when to communicate, when can you wait 5 minutes, when can you wait an hour, and how many different media have to be involved. So it's amazing what we can do with Twitter. We get to a large fraction of the students, either directly or indirectly. We get to a few faculty, not many. And we certainly get to alums, but that's what covered everything. So I don't send a important campus message out just by Twitter, but sometimes it's the most effective way to get to people quickly. And sometimes it snowballs. The thing about Twitter is that if there's something about your message that clicks, it goes viral, and pretty soon hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. And you hope that that's a good thing. It's not always, but so far so good. I've been careful not to, I'm pretty careful about what I tweet, although I hope that my personality is reflected in my sense of humor sometimes.
And outside looking in and looking, I think it really does. And even just what you said, I think I was telling Dennis earlier, I think it goes to whatever your personality is in real life is probably what will reflect in people's professional, online presence. And I think even just you having the genuine, like, sure, I'll meet this random guy, Kevin. But I think that reflects in why you're in this position in leadership. And I'm curious whether it's your peers within other presidents of other major institutions or other up-and-coming leaders within higher ed, student affairs, or another industry. What would you say to people that might be skeptical of what you're doing, or on getting on Twitter, or indulging into the digital community? I think because I hear a lot of skepticism and the ifs and the negative part. It's
only been positive for me. That's I would say that I can't imagine going into a role like this in this after 2010 or so and not being involved in some kind of social media. And usually Twitter's got to be at the core of that, the way we're set up right now. I think, I was an acting president and a provost before at another institution, and I was not involved in social media at all. And of course, you don't know what you're missing, and you don't know who you're not connecting with. So I found it to be open a door that has been surprising. When I'm walking on campus, I run into a lot of people who've only known me on Twitter, and they're kind of surprised to see that I actually exist. They kind of know what I look like, but sort of. And so they'll come up to me and say, "Oh, I follow you on Twitter."
Do they come up and ask for a selfie or something?
Oh,
or,
yeah.
So,
Well,
you're a mini
that's died down a little. For a while, that was every 5 minutes.
I'm going to ask you for a selfie before we leave.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we can work that out.
So is there any one piece of advice you would share to that demographic that just, and whether they're closer to my age or at the end of their career, and in these, like, is there one piece of advice like, this is why you need to get on a platform or be digital savvy?
Yeah, I just think so much of the people we're trying to communicate with, in a lot of cases it's the students, communicate that way. Not everybody is on Twitter, but it gets around. It shows up on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook. You know, some reverberation from what you did. And I also think this point about sharing some of your personality or vulnerabilities or your humanity helps students understand that the university is not being run by a machine. That there are lots of people that are really devoted to the success of our students and our faculty, and they make mistakes, but they're working hard at this goal of seeing everybody successful. And I think it's hard. It's hard for that to come through. It comes through in person, and I think it comes through in social media. It's hard to do it in a letter.
Yeah, you have a lot of different mediums and a lot of different groups you target. And I talked about this the last few days. It's kind of like you're opening up the social media peephole of the institution and your role. And I think that we're living in this culture, especially this generation of students. They're interested in the transparency and the honesty and the the authenticity of what you're trying to achieve, and that you're human. Like you're not different than anybody else.
Well, what I tell especially my student followers that I'm giving the meat and potatoes. It's not all dessert. So there's going to be once in a while I'll throw something out there that is intended to be funny or lighthearted, but I'll also throw out things and retweet things that I think they should know this.
Yeah. So it's that balance. I think that people understand. So one of my last questions. So last night I did a talk to probably about 120, it was probably first years and sophomores, and the topic was leveraging social media to find a dream, a job, a career or job that you would love. And a lot of the work I do with my other organization is the niche movement. And so one of the first things I started out with was the word audacity, having the audacity to take bold risk and kind of go an unconventional route. And I really left saying, don't settle for the status quo, but realizing we live in the limitless connection economy. There's no more gatekeepers, and we can do things like this. And I actually, my second to last slide, I screenshotted our conversation, was like, and a lot of them actually, I was like, you should be following your president. And I think a lot of them picked up their phones and did that. But
I did get a little burst there.
So what would you tell, and whether it's Virginia Tech students or any, so Dan's, you're 18, 19 years old, what would you tell people in that position of what we've been talking about, limitless connection, of like not having the fear that you can't connect with anybody?
I think that's true, that it provides so many opportunities. You can connect with anybody in the world too. It's not just who you happen to run into. So I think that's powerful. It's hard because we are humans and time marches on, so you only have so much time to devote to it. That's one thing that's a real challenge. Is some days I have a half an hour to engage on social media. Some days I literally have 20 seconds, and I still try to do something like a retweet or something just to keep it connected. But there's only so much time. But if you do it right, and people will engage over Twitter. They wouldn't be on it if they didn't want to engage. So and if they're on it and they're trying to be secretive or something, then their account's protected. That's a whole different style to using it. That's fine. But if they're on it and engaged, then you should feel confident in tweeting at someone. You can always direct message them, but you should be confident in trying it out. And if they don't respond, oh well. That's the worst that can happen. I'm sure I try to respond to many of the tweets that come at me, but once in a while you don't.
You just can't.
You have 8 hours where you're offline and you can't do it. So apologies to whoever I offended by not responding, but I try to do that when I can. It's also an era of self-branding, and this is something that we talk a lot about. We've had a really interesting conversation with our alums on this a few months ago, but it's different. You're not. It used to be in my generation that you were branded by the company you worked for, the car you drove, the neighborhood you lived in. That's passé for this generation. They self-brand. They self-brand by their experiences, and I think that comes through in social media. Where it's headed, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to imagine that it's going to be more complex, or where's that going to lead? I don't know, but I think our students are pretty much in tune with the idea that they're going to be changing jobs, and a lot of
it's a straight line.
Yeah, it's voluntary in a lot of cases. They're going to be seeing another opportunity to jump to something more exciting, better aligned to their interests, and social media kind of allows them to explore and poke around and look for and fish a little, see if there's something going on over there they like. You can see the whole world through it if you're careful.
Yeah, you can get some context of potentially where they want to work, or where they want to get involved with their community. Last night I started to close with actually some tactile, like I showed different email templates they could use to reach out to people, ways to tweet. So obviously I've been doing this for 5, 10 years or so, and I kind of understood how I might be able to get in touch with you. What would be like a very tactile one piece of advice if somebody wanted to get in touch with somebody like you, or maybe somebody in their mid to late 20s that are working at a startup they potentially want to connect with? What would be a way that you would frame a tweet to somebody that you want to get in touch with in 140 characters?
Well, yours was great, but I get tweets from students all the time who there's got to be a when, where, why, how in that 140 characters. So it's got to be when do you want to meet, or when do you want to connect, why, and sometimes there's not enough to do that in depth, but enough so that you can understand why the connection is desired, and where. Once in a while I get these invitations. Join us on the drill field for such and such, President Sands and our VT Sandsman. And I have to tweet back, say, when? I know where, but why?
They're just looking for your followers.
So it's the same thing in a letter or anything. So when, where, why, how.
You gotta shrink it down.
Somehow you got to
make it touch creative, personal.
Yeah, and that's it's much easier for me to respond to that than an open-ended. Okay, can you do this? Well, maybe when.
Sure, yeah. I think that's very specific advice. That's all I really have. Is there anything else that you would talk on digital leadership, or what we just talked about with students, or any last piece of advice?
Well, I was just reflecting on probably the most interesting, kind of looping back around and answering a question you asked a little bit ago. Probably the most interesting thing I ever did with Twitter is I came home after a long day, went to the Grove, which is where the president lives. We have a flat on the second floor, like a little apartment. And I was really tired. Just beat. It was like 8 or 9 o'clock. And I put on my jeans and a t-shirt or something, and I was ready to just settle down and relax for a few minutes, go to bed. And someone tweeted at me from Hillcrest Hall, which is where it's part of the Honors College, and it's just right next door to the Grove. He said, "Hey, we're having a coffee house tonight. Can you come over?" And they had a picture, and it looked really interesting. And then I got a few more tweets from the same group,
so
rallying you. And I thought, okay, I'll wander over there. What a great event! It was all a talent show, essentially, of multifaceted talent show, and they had recruited students who were being recruited there to the first year class, and they had the 150 existing members, and the talent I saw, and I would never have known about that had they not tweeted at me. And it wasn't a big deal for me. I walked for 2 minutes. I was there, and I didn't change or anything. Came back, an hour and a half later or something, and that's the kind of thing that can happen with Twitter or with social media. The spontaneity.
That's a cool story to close on. Thank you so much. I know where people can find you, but anybody in the higher ed, student affairs, or young generation, where can they find you on Twitter? What's your handle?
At VT Sandsman.
I love it.
And there's a long story there, but at VT Sandsman.
Cool. That's a whole other topic. To me, seriously, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I didn't know what to expect, but thank you.
No, I appreciate it.
So we're on the drive back to DC. It's about 6:20, about 2 hours in. But 2 hours ago we interviewed President Timothy Sands, President of Virginia Tech. I kind of keep saying this, but I anticipated that the reason he's on Twitter and he's so accessible and fun and lighthearted and just a nice guy is because he actually was a really nice guy. Just immediately his demeanor when he came out and greeted us, right, Dan? Like he just was, smiled, shook our hand, was curious about both of us, and invited him right into his office and let us really set up in his office wherever we wanted to. And I was just blown away by the fact that he went all in on Twitter. He had some great success with it, and that he does believe that, he talked about there is some vulnerability. Not every tweet or everything he does on there is perfect. And I think that's what we have to realize is you open yourself up to a little vulnerability, but he also said the positive and the upside just so much outweighed the what ifs and the negatives and some of the criticism he might get. But the biggest thing that we walked away from is he's like the hub of the wheel, and he's able to disperse information about campus closings or events happening on campus, or resources and services. Or he was sharing the story that he just got a tweet one night when he was done with work and went to a coffee shop series and met with some of the students. And so he's using this as like a 360 degree way. What I love to talk about is that the university isn't a machine. There's some life behind it. And I was just blown away, just serious. And even off camera, we were talking about different ideas. He was talking about Twitter as a business. And so I really think there's some interest and some more things to learn about digital leadership.